Good morning. It is Monday, February 22nd, and we are here for a morning devotion. And again, we're using Lent for Everyone, the Gospel of Mark by Tom Wright. And today's focus verse is Mark chapter 2, verses 18 through 22. And so the scripture reads, John's disciples and the Pharisees' disciples were fasting. People came and said to Jesus, "Look here, John's disciples are fasting, and so are the Pharisees' disciples. Why aren't you?" "How can the wedding guests fast?" Jesus replied, "if the bridegroom is there with them. As long as they've got the bridegroom with them, they can't fast. Mind you, the time is coming when the bridegroom will be taken away from them. They'll fast then, all right. Now, no one sews unshrunk clothes onto an old cloth. If they do, the new patch will tear the old cloth, and they'll end up with a worse hole. Nor does anyone put new wine into an old wineskin. If they do, the wine will burst the skin, and they'll lose the wine and the skin together. New wine needs new skin." And so Professor Wright writes, "I'm writing this not long after the worldwide commemoration that took place on the 10th anniversary of the terrible attacks on New York and Washington on September 11, 2001. In many countries around the globe, people stopped what they were doing and paused to remember and shudder. Many wept. There were church services, solemn music, the reading out of the names. Some great and terrible events are felt to be so important that only a pause, only a solemn commemoration will do. It seems to be quite wrong that we should have a party or a dance, or indeed a wedding at such a time. Can you imagine the effect if, as a commemoration of New York were at its height, a clown and a juggler had burst out of the crowd and started to perform funny, silly antics to make the crowd laugh? People would be shocked. The police would probably have come and hustled the troublemakers away. Nobody knows how long America will go on commemorating this horrible day. But the Jewish people of Jesus' day has been commemorating other disasters as great as those on September 11th and much greater for centuries. They looked back to the terrible events when Babylon had come and destroyed Jerusalem, burnt the temple to the ground, and taken the people into captivity in a land far away. Only the most solemn commemorations would do if the people were to recall, with due solemnity, events that dramatic. So like New Yorkers on September 11th, the Jewish people kept special days when they fasted and prayed and remembered. This was part of their national identity. It was part of what made them who they were. Everybody who wanted to take the great national story seriously would join them. But Jesus' disciples were not joining in. They were not fasting when all the others were. And so like people laughing and playing at a 9/11 commemoration, they scandalized those who saw them. "Why aren't your disciples fasting?" Jesus' reply explains in a vivid and explosive little image of what is going on. This has nothing to do with Judaism being legalistic and Jesus being eager to abolish rules. It has nothing to do with Jews trying to impress God with their moral effort and Jesus telling them that you don't have to do this after all. It has nothing to do with what Jesus has already been saying, that the time had been fulfilled and God's kingdom is arriving. Jesus wasn't teaching a new kind of religion or a different moral code. He was launching the project that was designated to fulfill all of Israel's dreams, to undergo the long years of shame and sorrow and replace them with a great celebration, a sort of wedding party, if you will. Jesus, in other words, is explaining his disciples' failure to fast on the appropriate day by claiming that this moment, the time of this public career, is a long-awaited special time, the time when God and Israel are getting it together again at last. The picture of the wedding party looks back at various biblical passages and highlights the extraordinary claim that Jesus himself is the bridegroom who has come to celebrate his wedding. There is no way the wedding guests can fast while that's going on, though in a typical dark side, because Jesus' kingdom will only come through his suffering and death. There will come a moment of fasting, of utter desolation, when the bridegroom is taken away. Jesus then broadens out the picture. You don't stick a new patch on an old coat or put new wine into old wineskins. You can't. In other words, patch up the old life of Judaism with a little bit of kingdom teaching. You can't expect to squash the new life of the kingdom into the old bottles of Jerusalem. This is not to repeat because there was nothing or that there was anything wrong with Judaism. The Jews were God's people, struggling to be faithful to God's covenant. No, the covenant itself was looking forward to the time when God would do the new thing he'd always promised. Now he was fulfilling that promise, even though it didn't look what most people had expected. And when the moment arrives, you can't hold on to the old ways. Candles are great when it's dark, but when the sun rises, you need to blow them out. People have often quoted this passage about new wineskins to justify innovations in the church. Fair enough, up to a point. God is still the God of surprises and new ideas. But the main point, the far deeper than all our small rearrangements of the furniture, is that when the coming of Jesus, Israel and the world was given a new set of rules, a new type of religion, but new creation itself. So isn't it a bit odd, as we get into the stride of our Lenten disciplines, to talk about Jesus and his disciples refusing to fast? Not a bit. It's because of this new creation, launched once for all with Jesus himself, that we need to take time and make the effort to bring our lives into line with the new reality. We do not fast because we commemorate some great national disaster. We fast because it is already caught up in God's kingdom project, into God's new world. We need to be sure that we are saying a firm goodbye to everything in us that still clings to the old. So today, help us, gracious Lord, to be wise in our disciplines, to celebrate new life, and to put to death all that distracts from it. So really simple, what he's saying is, we have a tendency in the church to look back at the past and to commemorate the past and celebrate the past, when we need to be forward thinkers. We need to be looking for the future, because that's what Jesus was doing. Jesus didn't come to celebrate the past and all of Judea. He came to offer them something new. This is what God's kingdom looks like. This is the new wine that is out there. Let us celebrate that new wine and stop looking so much at the past, but look to the future of what God's kingdom has planned for us.